Hello friends, welcome back to another video and a very exciting one, which is my birth story. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Kirsty. I'm 26. I live in Adelaide, Australia with my beautiful little family, which is my husband Hayden, our 19-month-old little girl Harper, and 11 days ago I gave birth to our second beautiful little girl and we named her Marley. Now, if you want to hear a little bit about my pregnancy with Marley, I did do a pregnancy series all about my pregnancy this time, finding out I was pregnant, my first trimester, and some pregnancy updates along the way, as well as what I had hoped for my labour this second time around. Also, if you want to hear my labour story from my first daughter, I will have all of that linked down below, because my plan was to try and get this labour to be a lot different to my first labour, because my last labour was very long. My daughter was posterior. There was just all sorts happening, which I hoped to do differently this second time around. So I ended up going overdue quite a lot in the end with this second baby. I had an appointment at 40 weeks and 3 days, and I had a vaginal examination, and it showed that I was like 1 to 2 centimeters dilated and my cervix was really soft and squishy and like ripening, but it had a little bit of length to it still. So she irritated my cervix a little bit and said, like, asked me if I wanted to be booked in for an induction the next week in case I still hadn't given birth. Now, this midwife was pretty confident that I would go into labour naturally within a few days, so I was like, yep, book in the induction, I won't need it anyway, but yeah, let's do it, because I have a toddler at home, I'm very tired, I was really starting to struggle with still being pregnant at this point, and I just wanted to meet this baby. So I said, yep, let's book in for an induction. So she booked me in for 6 p.m. on Thursday the 9th of February to get the gels inserted. So the plan was that I would get the gels inserted and then I would stay in overnight, and if things didn't progress I would then get my waters broken the next morning. So we packed everything, got all ready, we took board games, we took my laptop, and we're really excited. Like, we left Harper with Hayden's parents at our house, knowing that when we came back it would be with her baby sister. So we were very excited. I obviously did not give birth in between and ended up going in for the induction on that Thursday. We went in, we got there at 6 p.m. and they just had to put the CTG on first to check Bubs was all good. Then at about 6:30 they checked me, and nothing had really changed from like a whole week before, basically, or 6 days before. So I was still just like, I think she could stretch me to 3 centimeters, but I was still like pretty much 1 to 2 centimeters. My cervix had ripened more, so she said that I did not need the gels. My cervix still had a bit of length to it, but that it had ripened enough. Instead, she said that she would break my waters, and she asked if I wanted to wait until the next morning and come in the next day and get my waters broken, or if I just wanted it done then. And we had mentally prepared to not go home, and so we decided, yeah, let's just break the waters. Like, we're ready to meet this baby. We'd set everything up for Harper. We just thought, like, we've came here now, let's just get it going. So she broke my waters at like 7 o'clock, and then we got out some card games and some board games, and we had some music playing. Like, I had a really nice playlist on and we were just vibing. Things from 10 o'clock until about, let me just check my notes. I have a couple of notes, not very many. From 7 o'clock until like 10, we just were sort of chilling. I was getting through the contractions quite easily at this point. Like, they were starting to ramp up, but they weren't too bad. Probably like a 6 or 7 out of 10. Like, I was managing them fine. And then so at about 10 p.m. ish, I ended up putting the TENS machine on, and was then, according to the midwife, was in like active labor. My contractions were getting worse, they were getting quicker, where I needed some extra pain relief. So I put on the TENS machine and was really just embracing all of it, to be honest. Like, I was making sure to keep my face really soft. I had the most beautiful midwife ever. Shout out Lily, you were the best. Honestly, she had just finished uni, and honestly, it's just made to be a midwife, and she just made me feel so confident and so strong. And I had said to them, like, remind me during the contractions to keep my face soft. Like, just remind me to really relax my body, because the worse they were getting, the more I was starting to sort of lose control through them. Had the TENS on at 10. I really loved the TENS. I would highly recommend, if you are going to give birth, a TENS machine is incredible. It definitely made a massive difference to my early labor. So I was like on the ball with my, like, I would sit on the medicine ball with my arms on the bed. I was on all fours with my arms on the medicine ball, was just sort of moving through the contractions. They were slowly getting worse and worse, and every time they started getting worse, we would then up the strength of the TENS. So we sort of managed my pain as we could that way. I think it was around midnight, 1 o'clock-ish, they were then getting even worse, and I asked for the gas. The gas was then helping for a while as well, which was good. And then again, every time the pain started getting worse, we would then up the strength of the gas, basically. And I was feeling really good at this point. I was like, these are getting quite bad. Hopefully I'm in transition. I'm really hoping we're getting to meet her soon. Like, I would love to be in a position where we're really getting close. Like, they were getting really, really intense, and I was struggling to keep my face calm through them, and I was starting to make a lot of noises, and well, like, I was trying to just like manage them however I could. And every now and then they would get to the stage where I like couldn't keep calm through the contraction. Like, I was losing control. And so we were like, okay, let's get checked and see if we've progressed much. Because at one point, it must have been around 8ish maybe, I got checked and I was like 4 centimeters. And so then, yeah, I got checked again at like, I think it was around midnight-ish, and they checked me maybe 1 or 2-ish. I don't really know. Honestly, the timings are something that, like, when you're in labor, time doesn't really exist. But it had been like a few hours of this, and I was on the gas for a little while, and I was getting to the stage where I was like, okay, if I'm not transitioning, I'm not going to be able to get through the rest of this. Like, if I'm not getting close to this goal and things aren't progressing, then I'm going to need the epidural, because they're getting unbearable to the state where I was losing control through them and my body was no longer relaxing through the contractions. They checked me, and I actually had to get a couple of people to check me because my cervix was still there. Like, my cervix was still had some length to it, but it was like they were saying once they got like past the cervix, my dilated to a 6. So to me, I had been in active labor for like 4 hours by this point, like, and wasn't really managing the contractions anymore. And if my cervix still hadn't changed, I knew that like I couldn't push whilst there was still length to my cervix. Like, she wasn't going to fit through there. But then it was kind of confusing because I don't really know what that means as far as like my cervix still had a length to it, but I was still dilating. Like, I had dilated 2 centimeters in that time. So it was a bit strange, and I still don't really understand. Maybe I'll have to ask Lily about it. And at this point as well, my student midwife was here too, hanging out. We were all like, it was like me, Hayden, my student midwife, and this other midwife, the 4 of us in the room. And it was really, really beautiful up until this point. Like, I was feeling so proud of myself. I was feeling like this is the labor I wanted. This is the labor I was really hoping for this time. And it was really everything I had hoped for. But we were getting to the stage where I was like, I'm not going to be able to handle it much longer if I'm not getting close. So they got a couple people to check my cervix, and they all said the same thing, that like my cervix wasn't ready, but I was dilating. I don't know. It still doesn't really make sense to me, but that's what they said. Yeah, I sort of was like, okay, well, I'm going to need the epidural, because if I'm not going to, like, if nothing's, like, I'm still only at 6 centimeters, I'm only just over halfway. And I was getting to the stage where I was like, if I keep going, I'm not going to have the energy to push her. My body is so exhausted. It's like, what, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning by this point. I hadn't slept since the night before. Like, I was knackered. And we'd had Harper all day. Like, I was very tired. Whereas I had thought that I would sleep that night and get my waters broken the next morning and, like, be rested, you know? But I wasn't, because we went straight into labor. In hindsight, maybe I should have waited till the next morning to get my waters broken, but it was what it was. So then they were like, okay, well, we'll get the anaesthetist to come. And that to me happened quite quickly. I feel like there was whatever they're called. I felt like he was there quite quickly, and he was then like talking me through like, oh, there's some risks, blah, blah. I was like, I don't care. Like, yep, that's fine. Because then they had to take the TENS off me, obviously, to put the epidural in. And so I sat on the bed, you've got to like move around sideways, and then it started getting really hard to control the contractions whilst in this weird position. Because I had been able to move around and be in good positions for such a long time, then managing them whilst sitting still and in this awkward, like, hunched over position, I really struggled. And then at some point in this time, I unintentionally took too much of the gas. Now, I have never heard of this happening before, and I've never heard of anyone experiencing this, and I don't know if it's common or if this happens to people. And I'm gonna apologize, I might cry in this point because it got really wild for a second here. So I took in too much of the gas, and I literally went to another universe, and I had a complete trip. Like, I was not in my body, I was not in the room anymore. Where I went to, and I don't know, it seems really silly saying it out loud, but like, I literally tripped. Like, in my universe, everything around me was like this bright pinky purple color. I was spinning, like the whole room was spinning around me, and I was in the position to push. So I thought in my mind, they were like, baby's ready to come, it's time. I had all the midwives around me, Hayden was around me, and there was this song playing in the background, and every time it got to this certain note, I was supposed to push Marley out, and it kept going and I kept missing. Her heart rate was getting really high, and it just kept happening, and like, you know, like in a dream when you're like trying to chase something but like your legs don't move, it was kind of like that. Like, I just kept trying, and they kept saying, you've got to get her out, you've got to get her out, quick, like on that beat, you have to get her out, you have to get her out. And I just could not physically do it. Like every time I just kept missing and just kept missing and just kept missing, and I was getting really panicked and like hyperventilating. And then she flatlined and we lost her. And so like in my universe, like where I was in the world at that moment, Marley had died, and I was giving birth to a stillborn. So that was all happening in my like head, and I was saying like, we've lost. I was like, this didn't happen with Harper. I never went to this, because I thought at first, I was like, this is what people mean when they say you go out of body and collect your child, like when you give birth to them. And I was like, this never happened with Harper, this isn't how it happened. And then she flatlined, and I thought she had died. And then, I don't even know how to explain it, but it just got really weird after that. And then suddenly I was being shaken, and everyone, like I came back and everyone was like, Kirsty, like, do you know where you are? Do you know what's happening? And I was like, she's gone, like we've lost her. And they were like, no, she's fine, like everything's fine, she's okay. Like her heart rate's fine. Like obviously Hayden then saw me in this like distraught state, thinking that our daughter had died, and I literally thought she was gone. And then the epidural got put in me, and then emotionally and like mentally I was just sort of like checked out, because I had just like watched my daughter die, and then got brought back and she was still alive, and I was getting this epidural put in me, and I was back in this room where all this pain was. And so then I was sort of checked out for the next like few hours. I feel like they put the epidural in, and then it takes a little while to set in, and so I was really not handling those contractions at all. And so because I then had to just be still on this bed for it to start setting in, I then was just sort of like crying through them, basically. Like the pain was so bad and I couldn't do anything to stop it, and so those next few contractions were just horrendous. And then eventually the epidural set in, which was amazing. And then they realized that she was posterior, like Harper was, so that was awesome. And then things kind of got weird in the aspect that they very much mirrored my labor with Harper once I got the epidural. My heart rate and Marley's heart rate were matching, and so they had to put like a monitor on her head and put it inside me. It fell out 3 times, just like it did with Harper, which is so weird. I had to lay on my side for a little while with the peanut between my legs again, which I had to do with Harper to try and get her to turn. And again, I could only be on a certain side, because then if I went on the other side, her heart rate would change. So I stayed on my right side again. So that was really weird. By this time it was like 4 a.m. by the time all of this sort of happened. And we sent my student midwife home so that she could have a sleep. And I got told that like at 8:30, 9 o'clock, they would check me, like, everyone just have a rest, chill for a bit. At 8:30 or 9 o'clock, they would check me to see if I was dilated enough, to see where we were at. If I dilated enough, I think they might have put the hormone drip in me. I'm actually not sure. Like ramp up my contractions, I think, but I'm not even 100% sure at this point. So the good thing was we had a mattress thing that I had been sitting on, like I had been using when I was on my hands and knees through labor, and they got that, and Hayden could have a rest on there. So Hayden had a bit of a sleep, which was great, like maybe 4 hours, which was amazing. And I like rested for those 4 hours, and just like I dozed off a bit, but then people would check me, and then they kept having to move the CTG monitoring and blah blah blah. I did my obs every often, an hourly or whatever it is at that point. So I like rested but didn't sleep necessarily, but got some time to rest. And then weirdly we then got moved rooms, because the room we were in, the windows needed fixing, and the guy was there to fix the room, so they carted me out into a different labor room, which was bizarre. And Hayden like had to pack up all my stuff and my laptop with all the music on and all of those sorts of things. So that was like a bit annoying, but it was fine. So then we moved rooms, we waited the few hours, and then when I got checked again, I was 10 centimeters, which was amazing. They wanted to give her a little bit of time to naturally descend, which was fine, and then it was going to be time to start pushing. So I think I must have got checked at like 9, and then at 10 they were like, yeah, let's push. So then I started pushing at 10. Oh, and before I got to the pushing stage, they realized that my epidural had gotten a bit too high up, and so they took it off me, basically. So like the gas got taken off me, the epidural got taken off me. So by the time I went to push, I started to be able to feel everything. Like all my feelings sort of came back. Started pushing, and I could tell that she was not, like, she wasn't far enough down. And I was pushing with all my might, and everyone was like cheering me on and saying like, yes, you're doing such a good job, you're doing such a good job. And I was like, I don't feel like these pushes are doing anything. I don't feel like she's getting any closer. I feel like she is just there still, quite high up in my cervix or in my uterus or my birth canal, whatever. Like, I don't feel like she is close enough. Like, she is miles off still. And I was getting absolutely exhausted, because when you're then pushing, like, you use all of your might to push. I was like, she is not getting any closer. So they then said that they might need to use the ventouse, like the vacuum thing that sucks on the head and like gets them out. And that really panicked me, because I really, really didn't want any medical intervention unless absolutely necessary. That was in my birth plan, written down. I really did not want that. But at the end of the day, however my daughter got here safely was fine by me at the same time. I was like, oh, I really don't want that to have to happen. So I did a few more pushes. I still felt like nothing was really happening. And then all of a sudden she must have turned into the right position, because the next contraction I pushed and she moved so much that then her head was like she was crowning. And Hayden was like, oh my gosh, I can see her head. And then they got me to check and I could feel her head. And I was like, wow, that all changed very quickly. Like, I think everyone was expecting a very long journey to me to get her out. And then all of a sudden she must have just been like, I'm good. And yeah, I managed to get her so far in one push. And then they were like, okay, like another big push. So I did a big push and got like her whole head out. And then they were telling me to slow down. So then it gets horrendously painful at this point when your baby is like half out. Like, her head was hanging out of me, and they kept saying like, okay, now do like little push, little push, little push. Okay, now bigger push. Like, okay, now just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. And I'm like, I can't. This is so painful. Like, I was having a really, really hard time. And they were like trying to get her shoulders out because they were a little bit stuck. And it was just the most excruciating pain of my entire life. I just remember thinking like, I just want to push her out. But then that's when like you can tear, and you know, we want to preserve as much of my vagina as possible. It's like breathing and breathing, and then doing these little pushes, and then stopping, and then doing a big push, and then breathing. And I was a good student. The midwife said to me after, you really followed instructions well. Like, I did exactly as she told me. And then finally she was like, okay, like, this is the push. And I gave her the biggest push, and they like lifted her out, and she came onto my chest, and it was just the most euphoric, beautiful feeling ever. And like, I didn't get that with Harper, which is, I think I was so exhausted by the time I gave birth to her, and like I had a hemorrhage, and there was so much trauma before, and like it was just so long, and I was so tanked that I didn't have that big rush that everyone talks about when I had Harper, which was so strange. And I remember being like, I'm supposed to feel different. But when Marley got put on my chest, and Hayden and I just looked at each other and we just cried, and I was like, oh my god, like I did it. I didn't need any help in the end, and my baby is here, and she's alive, and she was just so perfect, and she was, oh, it was just the best moment ever. And just so like, I can't even explain it, but it was just the best thing ever. And my heart just, I just felt so happy, and I was still getting so much pain, but it was fine because she was here. And yeah, she was then born at 3.7 kilos, and I had one very minor tear that did not need stitches, which I am so stoked about, because I was then like terrified of getting stitches because I wasn't allowed the gas, and stitches hurt, and I could feel everything at that point. So I was like, oh gosh, that's gonna be horrendous. But they checked me and said I didn't need any. Unfortunately, Marley then started making some like grunting noises, and so the peds nurses came in and checked her and took her, unfortunately, because they were like, just in case she has any type of infection, we're going to take her straight up to the NICU and get her on some antibiotics to make sure she's all good. They like gave her a little bit of oxygen for a few minutes just to make sure she was breathing okay. Her and Hayden got like whisked away, which was kind of horrendous, and I was really, really worried about how our breastfeeding journey would then then go, because in my plan I wanted to feed her straight away. But luckily she latched amazing when I then got up there a few hours later, and we've had a very, very successful breastfeeding experience, and she has gained weight really quickly and all of that was fine. But it did mean we spent a couple of days in the neonates and the special care unit. I spent an extra few days in hospital to what I expected. I sort of thought I would spend like one night in hospital with Marley and then come home, but I ended up being in there until the Monday. So I was there from Thursday night until Monday, so things were a bit hectic for Harper, bless her, and we had to really juggle that. But yeah, then we got to come home and have been living the blissful life of 2 under 2. It has been hectic but beautiful and amazing, and she is just so buttery and squishy and perfect, and I am just on absolute cloud 9, and I feel so, so lucky. I feel like our family is exactly what it's supposed to be, and yeah, I'm just so excited to watch these little girls grow together, and my recovery has been really good. But I'm going to save some of that sort of thing for another video, because I'm doing a Q&A. I've asked you guys on Instagram to ask me some questions more on like the after birth sort of situations, and I have a whole bunch, so I'm very excited to film that, so that will be coming soon. But yeah, that is my birth story with my second daughter. It was like medically quite good, other than the fact that I literally tripped and thought she died. So I feel like I have a bit of processing to do still, because it was kind of traumatic, and every time I tell it I cry. So I think I'll be telling people like when they come over, I'm like, just watch my video on my birth story, because I can't tell it again, because I just cry every time, because it was really traumatic for a moment there. But I'm very lucky. She is perfect. We are so in love with her. She has been a much easier baby than Harper. I don't know if that's because I'm more confident as a mum, I know what I'm doing, or if she's just a more chill human. I guess we'll find out as time goes on. But yeah, that is how Marley Mary Virgo came into the world. I hope you enjoyed watching / listening to my birth story. I love hearing people's birth stories, so I'm so glad I have been able to share mine. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. If you are not subscribed and you like the content that I bring out, please subscribe. It helps me out a whole bunch. And I will see you in my next video, which will be very soon. Bye.